Welcome to the Accomplish More podcast, created specifically for the small business owner who doesn't think small. I'm your host, Gayla Scrivener. This show is where you'll learn practical ideas, hints, tips, and tricks to help you grow your small business where you can leverage your time and to accomplish more. Hello there, and welcome to the Accomplish More podcast. I'm Gayla Scrivener, and I thank you for joining me today. I've got a question for you. Do you ever feel scattered and lost in your direction? Or maybe too many things to do without enough time to do them? Now, I think that we've all struggled with this. I may be wrong, but even the most organized people struggle with time management. But doesn't it feel like we're all alone when we are in the midst of overwhelm? All the things are just piling up all around you. All the pressure seems to be all on your own shoulders, and you just don't know where to start. Or when you're working on one thing, you can't concentrate because you feel like you should be doing something else, or the other 100 things on your list, actually. As you get to know me, you'll soon realize that I'm a big advocate in scheduling everything. In fact, if you go back to one of my first podcast episodes, I think it's number 4, it's all about scheduling to gain productivity. I truly believe that if you are trying to implement new habits and new processes, you've got to be diligent with scheduling. It's important to have a plan for long-term goals, short-term goals, or anything, but that plan needs to be drilled down to monthly, weekly, and daily activities to keep you moving forward in achieving whatever you want to do. If you want to stay status quo, then I don't think adhering to a schedule is all that important. Now for me, just recently, I made some major changes in my schedule, and I'm just now getting used to it. I made the changes so that I could achieve those goals that I set out for myself. Maintaining a schedule is not something that is set in stone, and it does take work to be disciplined in always planning ahead. Honestly, there are times that I fall away from noting things on my calendar. What happens is that I wake up with no direction, so I let the distractions navigate my day. I don't prioritize as well, and I end my day feeling like I didn't get anything accomplished. I fall into that status quo mode. I soon get frustrated because I don't feel like I'm making any progress and moving forward. So I become more diligent in my pre-planning of my days and my weeks. I'm going to go over scheduling again today, even though just a few weeks ago I covered it in an earlier podcast, because I feel it is truly very important, and it's a tool that we should be mastering and readdressing to stay on track. When I worked in the corporate world, and in essence had my regular office hours, I had a block of time that I was devoted to the company I was working for. Typically, it was 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, so therefore evenings and weekends were for my personal life. On the corporate clock, I had my schedule of activities and tasks that I needed to do daily. Oftentimes, priorities were shifted depending on the goals of the higher-ups in management. But then, when I left work, it was me time or my family time. It was pretty easy to keep what I wanted to do all in my head, whether it was planning to go to a movie or my daughter had a school function, or I just needed to clean the house. Pretty much everything personal I could keep straight in my head. Then it all changed when I went into business for myself. You know, those lines of personal time and work time became extremely blurred. At first, I was just using my schedule to put meetings that I needed to attend. There was a lot of white space on my schedule. Inevitably, it soon became a habit to say yes to any meeting that anyone wanted to schedule with me. What that did is fill my day with meetings, and I was left to work on client work at night. Then I soon found myself not spending any time on my business development, and most importantly, no time for family activities. Truth be told, In the beginning, I didn't know my direction. I thought that meeting people was what I needed to do. The more I met with people, hopefully the more business I would gain. At first, that was a good strategy. It may have been a little chaotic, but still a good strategy. When I started my business, I was fresh out of the corporate world. My ideal customer wasn't a corporation. It was a small business. After all, virtual assistant services are great alternatives for small business owners to grow their businesses. That's when I joined a networking group which meets weekly. That was the first solid thing on my schedule as a brand new business owner. Then it was time to meet with people one-on-one and to get to know them. Those one-on-one meetings are good and very much needed, but what I ended up doing is scheduling them willy-nilly all over my calendar. Since my calendar was mainly made up of white space, if someone wanted to meet up with me at, let's say, 3 p.m. on a Monday, then someone else wanted to meet at 8 a.m. on Tuesday, yet another person wanted to meet at 1 p.m. on Tuesday, then another Thursday sometime. You get the idea. Meetings became spattered all over my schedule. White space still remained on my schedule, and I felt like I was everywhere in meetings and not sitting still long enough to feel accomplished in finishing up whatever I'd been adding to my to-do list. Right out of the gate, trying to start a business, I think it was something we all have to go through and learn. It's this startup stage that we are just trying to figure out our ideal customer, learn from others, testing out different approaches. We are learning from others and ourselves and gaining confidence. There's a great article from John Janst on the Duct Tape Marketing blog titled, "The 3 Natural Phases of Successful Small Business Growth." I'll link to the article in my show notes. I think it's a great illustration and reminder of our struggles as small business owners as we move through different phases of our business growth. He talks about the foundation stage, where John says, this phase isn't simply about getting your marketing materials and your website created. This is the crucial strategy laying phase, and it often requires starting and restarting. But the important element is a mindset of finding your niche and special approach. As he indicates, this phase takes time and patience, and is very hard to do when you've got a mound of bills and not enough income streaming in consistently to get them all paid. What I wish I would have done better in the beginning of when I first started my business was to be more intentional with my schedule. Instead of saying yes to every time someone wanted to meet with me, I should have blocked meeting times and days and put them together. So when someone asked if I'm available, I would look on my calendar and I would schedule only on certain days and certain times. I'd block this time out for just meeting times. What that would have done for me is to then plan around those blocked times to have complete focus on other things at other times. I want to stop real quick and say that I'm not one to be a woulda, shoulda, coulda type person. I know I just said what I should have done with my schedule back then, but I use that as a learning experience. When I gained control over my schedule, I have become more diligent in scheduling things. When I look back at the time early on, that was a time that I needed to shape my mindset on how important scheduling is in my productivity. I remember vividly that I was sitting in a class that business coach David Sims was putting on, and he advised time blocking for meetings. He said that when you want to meet with someone, to give them a couple of choices to choose from. He said that when your availability decreases, the more people want to meet with you. That was a crazy idea to put my head around. At the time, I felt like I needed to meet with everyone that requested a meeting with me at whatever time they needed me. I needed to be everywhere, and I felt my wheels were spinning. If I didn't meet with everyone, then could it be that an opportunity would be lost? The very idea that David would suggest to decrease my availability would actually increase my business because more people would want to meet with me, well, that just seemed ludicrous. It's like people saying to make more money, you should do less. It's hard to wrap your head around that until you begin to gain control over your schedule and being intentional with your time. Here I was in the very beginnings of my business, unsure of myself and feeling like opportunity was going to pass me by if I didn't meet with everyone who asked me to meet with them. I took David's advice. I began narrowing down my time and scheduling meetings only on certain days and times. I began blocking times. Quickly, I felt more organized and more in control over my time. I was no longer booking meetings just willy-nilly. I could focus certain times for meetings. Then my mindset began to shift. During this critical startup time, it wasn't that I met with less people, but I didn't have as much downtime between meetings. I could focus. Over time, as my client base grew and I had more client projects to work on, I changed my availability times on my schedule. The meetings that I was scheduling were for more qualified clients. Having things on my schedule makes me better able to make decisions on how to spend my time. Now I'm going to go back to John Jant's blog post about the phases of a successful small business. The next phase after foundation is growth. This is the time where you have traction in your business and people are seeking you out to do business with you. That's awesome. This is the time where you have to be even more intentional with your time. For me, this is where I began to really drill down my days on my schedule. I began moving items from my to-do list to blocks of times on my schedule. For a lot of people, when they look at my schedule, they get overwhelmed. For me, it's reassuring. I see those color-coded blocks and I am just assured. Maybe I'm weird in that sense. I don't know. It seems like I need to make so many decisions in a day's time that when I take a bit of time to pre-plan and block out my time, then when the day comes, that's one less thing I need to decide on. I already have my roadmap for the day. That doesn't mean that something won't happen that could change my schedule, but what it does mean, I'm able to help keep my priorities in check and be more confident in saying yes or no to distractions that come along the way. Also, in the growing stage, when you have control over your schedule, it helps you understand everything that you must do and be better organized when you're ready to delegate and create systems. One of my friends, bless her heart, is a very busy person, but she is all over the place. She's in the foundation stage of her business, and she is honestly fearful by wondering if her efforts are making any difference in the growth of her business. She's running around like a madwoman and trying out new things, but she isn't sticking to one thing or one strategy long enough to see if anything is working. She is concerned about paying the bills, and that's a really valid fear, but isn't really sticking to a strategy to gain some traction. Things don't seem to be happening fast enough for her, so she switches gears all of a sudden. One day, we sat down and looked at her schedule. It was practically blank. I can see why she felt so fearful. The way I see it, a blank schedule is a blank business. She started rattling off some appointments that she knew offhand at the top of her head. Now, in her head, she tried to have certain days and for certain types of clients. She said that she kept all that stuff in her head and she could remember all of it. But here's the thing. I remember her telling me that she'd miss appointments from time to time, and she had clients show up and completely had forgotten that they were coming. being a good friend that I am, I decided to bring that up. I gently nudged her to place all of those appointments that were rattling around in her head onto her calendar. We started color coding. We then blocked off times where she wants to have client time, and then we blocked off times for reoccurring meetings and reoccurring admin times. She started feeling more at peace and not so fearful. Instead of waking up and wondering what she'll do for the day, she can already have a plan to work on. Being intentional with your time isn't easy and can't be done with a snap of a finger. My friend is working hard to stick to a schedule. She still struggles with making appointments and not adding them to her schedule. She's getting better, but it's brand new to her. It's a brand new habit. And for her, it takes practice. Actually, I think it takes practice for all of us. People tell me sometimes that they can't make a schedule because things come up. Well, my friend, things come up for everyone. Things like sickness, phone calls, little emergencies, heck, even big emergencies. It happens to everyone. The people who are not intentional with their time and don't use their calendars effectively are the very ones who are always struggling to get enough done. I feel like I'm a pretty organized person, but I have to still work on my schedule and my planning. I'm not going to lie to you. It is work. It's work well worth it. With practice, it truly doesn't take much time. In fact, it saves time down the line. I know there are times that I get off track and I'm not as focused on planning on my schedule. When I fall into that habit, I find myself less productive and scattered. I begin to overextend myself and not having enough time to do the fun stuff. Then, if I'm at something that I should be having fun at, I'm worried that I'm so far behind on work stuff, so I'm distracted. When I get back on track and look ahead and plan my days and weeks, I am more at peace and I know how to prioritize better. How I do my scheduling is to take a look at the whole year and fill in the major things I already know that need to be marked off. Things like the events my husband and I want to attend and the trips that we want to go on were the first on my calendar. Then I block off reoccurring networking, client, and staff meetings for the year. That gives me a framework to work with. From there, on a weekly basis, I look ahead at the upcoming weeks to get a general idea in my head to start filling in other tasks and projects. Each day, I look at the next day to fill in what needs to be done in the upcoming days. I keep my schedule handy and I try to stay focused at the tasks I have scheduled for myself. I actually keep a Google Calendar as well as a written calendar. My written calendar is more of a general map of the major events. My Google Calendar is my detail, and that's where I have my daily appointments. Now, again, honestly, it does take work. Not always do you want to do the things you've listed out for yourself on your schedule. Not always do you allot enough time to do the task. Not always do you get around to getting to everything on your schedule. But the great thing is you are better equipped to move forward toward your goals because you see what you must do right in front of you and you learn to adjust and you can measure. One thing that I know I'm terrible at and I must continually work on is to intentionally have blank space for myself and my family. You know, I said that once you're in business for yourself, the line between work time and personal time is very blurred. When it comes to being intentional with your time, you should be intentional not only with the time for your business, but with your personal time. From the way I've been talking in today's podcast, you may think that I have every minute of every day planned out. No, not really. I think it's important to have downtime. I think it's good to have time to take a break from the regiment of a schedule. So there are times that I intentionally don't have a direction, and that is wonderful. I'm trying to make the line between business time and my personal time less fuzzy and more defined. That way, when I do have downtime, I'm much more relaxed and not worrying at all what I should be doing for work. For example, the other weekend, I wanted the whole day of nothing, just a day to do whatever I wanted whenever I pleased. No plan. Well, let me take that back. The only plan was to just block out that day. I wanted to wake up with no plan for the day, and the only restraint for myself was not to open my computer and no work-related stuff. For my personal time, I usually have in mind what I want to do, whether it's a family event, house chores, a trip, preparing for a trip, or something's usually planned. For that whole day, though, that I blocked off for, it was no plan day. There was absolutely no plan. And that's exactly what I needed. It was like being on a vacation, truly, a mental vacation. I ended up tagging along with my husband, Robert, while he did some outdoorsy stuff. He did what he wanted to do. I napped and I read. We spent some great time together relaxing, and that's just what I needed. By the next day, I was ready and more motivated than ever to follow my plan. Because I'm so driven on moving forward, I tend to fill my schedule with the work stuff, and it's just as important to fill the time with personal, family time, even if it's just to do nothing. In your journey of accomplishing more, I urge you to hop over to the show notes for the link to read John Jant's blog post. Understanding the phase of business you are in is truly beneficial insight because you aren't alone in your struggle. Then empower yourself by being intentional with your time. By planning your schedule, it will help you focus on what you truly need to be doing to move your business forward. Now, I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you found today's show helpful, please subscribe on iTunes and leave a comment. You can always send questions and comments to podcast@scrivenersolutions.com. That's podcast at SCRIVENER solutions.com. Until next time, have a fantastic week.